Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. Who, or what, is the I that sits at the very center of your world? We're about to go on a deep, philosophical investigation to find out.
Just think about it for a second. We all walk around with this feeling, right? This deep, unshakable sense that there's a solid, continuous me inside our heads looking out through our eyes. But what if that feeling is just an illusion? Today, we're going to put that very sense of self under the microscope, using a really powerful ancient framework to see what we find.
Okay, so before we can start looking for the I, we need to get one crucial tool from our Investigator's Toolkit. It's a way of seeing the world, a way of telling the difference between things that are fundamentally real and things that are just, well, assembled. First up, we've got things that are substantially existent. Now, you can think of these as the absolute fundamental building blocks of reality, the raw materials. They don't need other parts to exist, they just are. Their essence is totally self-contained. And then, on the other hand, we have what's called provisionally existent. These are things that are built or assembled from those raw materials. A house, for instance, isn't a fundamental thing in the universe. It's a name, a concept we give to a specific arrangement of wood and bricks and glass. It's like the difference between eggs, flour, and sugar, and the cake you bake. The ingredients are the real stuff. Cake is just a provisional name for what happens when you put them together. A classic example from the old texts makes this super clear. The raw data from our senses, sights, sounds, tastes, the feeling of touch, those are considered substantially real. But objects like a chariot or a vase or even an army, those are provisional. A chariot is just a handy label we use for an assembly of wheels, wood, and an axle. You start taking those parts away, and at some point, the chariot just isn't there anymore. So this brings us to the core question. Is our I, our deep sense of self, a substantially real thing, like a raw ingredient? Or is it a provisional assembly, like a chariot? To figure this out, the text lays out this amazing systematic search, a logical investigation with 4 possible roads to go down. Think about it. If a real, solid I actually exists, it's got to be in one of these 4 places, right? It's either the same thing as our body and mind, or it's a separate thing inside them, or a separate thing outside of them, or it's just completely unrelated. There's really no other logical option. So, let's start searching.
First up, is the I simply the sum of its parts? Is it just this physical body we have, plus the constant stream of thoughts, feelings, and everything else going on in our heads? Seems like a pretty logical place to start. But the text points out a huge problem right away. Our bodies are changing all the time. Cells are dying, new ones are born. And our minds? Come on, that's just a chaotic flood of thoughts and emotions from one second to the next. So if the I is the exact same thing as all that, then the I must also be constantly changing and falling apart. And that just doesn't line up with that feeling of a stable, enduring self we all have. So no, path 1 is a dead end.
All right, on to path 2. So what if the I isn't the body and mind, but something living inside of them? This is kind of like the idea of a soul, a separate, unchanging core essence that's like the driver of a car. It's a super common idea you see in cultures all over the world.
But the logic used to take this one apart is just razor sharp. Get this. If there were a truly separate, unchanging I inside you, it wouldn't be affected by what happens to the car, to the body and mind. It wouldn't feel the pain of getting sick, or the joy of a good meal, or the process of getting older. But we do feel all those things. Our entire life is defined by those experiences. So that means path 2 is out. It's another dead end.
Okay, things are about to get a little more abstract. What if the I is real, but it's a separate thing that exists completely outside of our physical and mental experience?
The text just dismisses this with this absolutely brilliant and kind of funny analogy. Arguing for a self that's outside the body and mind, it's like saying you can see a beautiful flower garland on the head of a stone maiden's daughter. A statue of a maiden can't have a daughter, right? The daughter is non-existent. So how can you put a real thing, the garland, on a head that isn't there? It's just a logical contradiction.
And that brings us to our very last shot, the final possibility. What if the I exists, but it has zero connection to a body, to feelings, to thoughts, to consciousness, to anything we actually associate with being alive? If a self has no physical form, no senses, no mind, it can't interact with anything. It can't feel love or sadness. It can't tell hot from cold. It would just be this inert, meaningless idea, totally cut off from life itself. For all practical purposes, a self like that might as well not exist at all.
So there we have it. After this really thorough, logical search, we've looked down every possible path, and we've come up completely empty. That solid, real, independent I that we feel so strongly in our gut, it's literally nowhere to be found.
But hold on, if there's no solid self, then what is all this that we're experiencing right now? This is the moment the investigation makes a turn, away from what the I isn't, to what our experience actually is.
And the answer is pretty mind-blowing. What we call me isn't a noun, it's a verb. It's a dynamic, flowing process. It's just a temporary coming together of these 5 interconnected streams of experience. Our physical form, the constant river of feelings, our sensory perceptions, our mental formations like plans and ideas, and the raw consciousness that's aware of it all. See? We're not some static rock sitting in the river of life. We are the river.
Now, this might sound like some really heavy, abstract philosophy, but the whole point is that this has incredibly profound, practical consequences for how we actually live our lives. This isn't just a fun thought experiment, it's a blueprint for a totally different way of being in the world.
And you can see it right here, laid out as 2 paths. On the one hand, when we mistakenly believe in this solid, separate self, we're living in ignorance. And that ignorance leads to craving, always trying to protect and please this imaginary me. That whole cycle just creates suffering. But when we see through the illusion with wisdom, that craving gets cut off right at the root. The entire chain reaction that creates suffering just stops.
This final insight from the text just ties it all together so beautifully. Clinging to a self is really just a fundamental misunderstanding of how everything works. The moment you see the assembled, interconnected nature of reality, you can't help but see the assembled nature of your own self. And right there, in that moment of clear seeing, the whole structure of suffering can just dissolve.
So we'll end by turning the question back to you. If that I you've always felt yourself to be is more like a process than a thing, more like a flowing river than a solid rock, what does that change? What could that mean for you right here, right now?